Hello, this is Jean Marie Ward for Buzzy Magazine. With me today is celebrated novelist, short story writer, and world traveler, Brenda W. Clough. Welcome, Brenda. 2019 marked the release of your entire Edge to Center trilogy, 3 books featuring the adventures, or misadventures, of time-traveling Victorian clergyman Jack Ragsland. This isn't your first work to feature time travel. What about time travel and dislocation attracts you so strongly?
I am a foreign service brat. My father was a diplomat with the U.S. State Department, and when I was a child, we lived all around the world, places that most people don't live. And because of it's fun, you can travel the world and you can not essentially pay for it because it's all in with your tax dollar. And so my father dragged us everywhere and it was great. And the thing about it is you get used to going to totally strange places. You get used to Dad rolling in and said, well, I think that next month we're going to the Philippines. Are you cool with that? And my mom said, sure, why not? Fine, we're all going to the Philippines, let's pack, and off we go. And so we moved around a lot, and you get used to it, and it's fun. And it is, but once you're not franked by the U.S. government, you really can't do that anymore. And if you have to pay for it out of your own pocket, it'd be brutal and expensive. So you can do it in fiction, and that's at least as much fun and cheaper. It's cheaper, and you don't have to pack. So there's a number of advantages.
The books of Edge to Center are set in a world that starts out very much like our own, but a lot of the action takes place in a fictional Southeast Asian nation, Jalanesia. You've been to a lot of Southeast Asian nations. What prompted you to make up one?
Well, the problem with real life is that you sort of have to stick with it. Whatever the history of Mexico is, you're sort of locked into I don't even know anything about the history of Mexico, but whatever it is, you're going to have to stick with it. You can't screw with it for fictional purposes. So if you could make it up, if you could make up a Central American nation that you needed to do stuff with, then you can do everything. You can tinker with the language, the history, the culture, the food, the fashions, everything. You can make it what it needs to be to make the book go. And it also saves you. It's like easier to make it up. To read all this history, it would be difficult. It would be boring. I don't want to do that. It's just easier to make it up. And if you rig it properly if you're making it up, then you can keep all the fun things, lose all the boring things, and then that's fun. Much easier. Makes life better.
And you still have to research anyway, though.
You do, but if you can make it up, then at least things can happen when you need it to happen. And you can explain, when I began writing it, the Victorian time traveler naturally speaks like a British clergyman from 1861. But if you, in contrast, I wanted to have him meet people who spoke like Americans, but I didn't really want it to be in America because Southeast Asia has a number of other reasons that works well. But that's easy to fix if you postulate that the imaginary country was part of the Cold War, and the Americans pumped in with the naval bases. Essentially you lay on that layer of American over whatever was going on with Southeast Asia, and everyone's cool. We eat hamburgers, we eat French fries. There's a lot of useful things you can do if you're making it up.
Yes.
You can cheat.
Yes. Although you've had a number of books released by big New York publishers, the 3 Edge to Center titles were published by Bookview Cafe. Could you tell our viewers a little bit about BVC and how it works?
Bookview Cafe is actually a cooperative. It's not truly a publisher. And essentially, it was founded by a bunch of female science. I'm so sorry to say this, but it's true that all core founding members were female. And we were all rolling around, as one does, with a bunch of backlist titles that essentially were no longer in print. Or, they might be in print, but yeah, you've got to, it's hard to find them. So we had all this stuff, and we said, surely something can be done. And that was just when e-publishing really began to kick up, and everyone said, this is a sign, we could do this. And so we said, we will have it's hard to do it by yourself because you have to do everything. You have to be all the monkeys. But if you could get in with a bunch of other people, not only do I do things that you can't do, and you can do the things that I can't do, but we sort of incentivize each other. Darling, we're waiting for you for that cover. Come on, and then this gets everything in motion, and things happen in a faster way than if you were just laying there. Get up in the morning. Well, shall we publish an ebook today, or shall we look at our email? And then what happens? Well, you know what happens.
You have a blog on BVC, and the last time I looked, you were discussing how to make a Victorian dressing gown. What is the source of your fascination with the Victorian era?
Well, that's because of the books, and this is a good example of why it's really better to make up a country with its own history and its own stuff, because then you can just make it up and you don't have to do research. All the Victorian stuff is sort of tied into all the Edwardian stuff that I did with my other time travel novel, Revise the World. And that one revolved around Titus Oates, who's a historical Edwardian explorer of Antarctica. He died on the ice. English people freezing to death, I've got to tell you, that's the way to go. But it is...
How would they notice?
Well, if you want to look up the death of Titus Oates, it's one of the most dramatic things in English literature. He did that stiff upper lip thing in the tent, and the storm is blowing, and it's a bajillion degrees below zero or whatever it is, and he knew he was holding back the team, and so he did that stiff upper lip thing, and he said, I'm just going outside, and I may be some time. And he walked out into the storm, and they all knew he was committing suicide. But, they were all on the point of death anyway. And so they said, hasta la vista, pal. And he walked off and he didn't come back. And his body has never been found, but, it's clear he froze to death. It was, So, an ideal candidate for time travel. Yes. Ideal. But then, you get it going. And to write that book, because it was told from his point of view, to write in the voice of a guy who was born in 1890, that's an English. So I did a lot of research to get his voice right, and I have in my back pocket enough, slang, enough period stuff, and there's something that you've got to be able to do something with this stuff, and so then it came to me, and actually it was Sarah Zittel who got me going on this. She said, "What we need to do, Brenda, is to write a sequel to." I forget what novel it was, but she said, look, it was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and she said, you love it, I love it, let's write a sequel. What should it be like? And we brainstormed about it for a while, and it sort of like never gelled. It has to. And this is a crafty metaphor. It has to be. It's like a tangle of story. We began creating a tangle of story things. Well, how about this? What would happen is, since it is going to have to be set in this period, should he be bombed in the Blitz? Why not? So you have all this stuff, but it's just this sort of pile of like yarn. Yeah. And what you have to do is you have to find a yarn at the end. You have to find an end, and you have to pull on it, and it has to come through enough so that you can cast on and start to knit, because that's the only way you get a garment. And I've done this a lot. You can generate like this huge tangle of stuff, but until you get the end of it, it's not going to start up going. Getting back to Sarah, and we were going to write this thing about Rebecca, but we never found the end of the yarn. It's still sort of laying there, all this stuff. And we're keeping it just in case, but we didn't do it. But then then it sort of petered out, and I thought, wait a minute, I have to do something with all this Edwardian and Victorian stuff. And then the other thing that I always felt is that there should be a sequel to The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, one of the founding books of the mystery genre, one of the great proto-feminist heroines of all time. Marian Halcombe was able to survive, the whole thing, the corsets, the being an ugly woman in a period, an ugly unmarried woman in a period when you had to be married, or you had to be pretty, and you had to be a nice girl, and all of these things back. And So Wilkie Collins created this wonderful heroine who was intensely popular. The books were monster hits. And people would write into the publishers and say, you know, I know she's a spinster, but I could be there for her. Could you send me her? You know, it's like, she's a fictional character, you know. But, you know, it's not like you're writing to Natalie Portman here. You know, you're actually writing a letter to Princess Amidala, really. So it was to that level of crazy. But he never did anything more with it. Hello, there should have been a sequel. Is this like rocket science? No. If you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. Fine, okay. So I said, well, I could begin, you know, grab the end of the yarn and pull, and then the whole thing began to snowball in a really annoying way. The first one is out through Serial Box, and
the first novel featuring her,
I'm
Most
so
Dangerous
sorry,
Woman.
I am so very, very sorry to say that there was a whole bunch of yarn in that tangle. In the period of time since Serial Box picked up on this, I have written 10 of these things. That's bad. Okay, 10s on spec novels, that's very, very bad. Don't do this, everybody. Don't do that. You know, that's bad. But anyway, I couldn't help it. I wrote 10 novels, bing, bang, bing, just like that. And even that was too much even for Serial Box.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're going to be able to swallow this one because there's just too many. But luckily, Bookview Cafe is a cooperative, and I went to them and I said, what do you think, 10 of these peppies? And they said, sure, why not?
And so 3 of them are edge to center.
Yeah, these are the 3 time travel novels are edge to center. And then we're going to run around with 10 neo-Victorian thrillers starring Marianne Halcombe at some point, because I'm going to have to, that's the other thing with a cooperative thing, is that since we all have to do this, it does take a little while. You know, we have to tinker with covers, we have to find copy. It is actually a fairly, and 10 of them is not, there's some economies of scale in doing this, but there's not it's going to be complex. I figure it's going to take a full year to get these all out, but then I figure that in, say, 2021, I'm going to bestride the subgenre of neo-Victorian thriller Colossus.
But your fans can find A Most Dangerous Woman featuring Marion at Serial Box.
It is there, and it's available both as a fascinating audiobook. The audiobook bit is actually fascinating, and print and ebook. So it's definitely there.
We're coming up against the end of the interview. And I almost hesitate to ask this after hearing about 10 sequels. What are you working on now?
Well, you know that there is, there's an anthology coming out in December of 2019, and it is going to be titled Alternate Beatles. I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's being edited by, it's coming out from, I can't remember that.
Mike Ventrella's project.
Michael Ventrella is editing it, and Ian Randall Strock is publishing it, but I can't remember the name of the publishing imprint that he's using. But that's okay. Anyway, Alternate Beatles. So I've written a short story for that. What happened was, with that one was, I said to Mike Ventrella, I said, I'm correct, right, in thinking that someone's already written that Alternate Beatles short story in which John Lennon either wasn't assassinated or survived being shot. And he said, oh yeah, I got 5 of those. So I said, fine. I will write you a short story about George Harrison and tantric sex. And he said, as you might expect, I don't have one of those.
No!
And I said, fine, all right, we're going to go with that.
Okay. Well, that's great. Thank you, Brenda. And thank you for Buzzy Magazine.